One town in Japan pays you cash every time you have a kid, not a tax break, not a coupon. Cash, straight to your bank account. And it worked. That town's birth rate hit almost 2.95, nearly triple the national average. But zoom out to the whole country, and Japan just posted its lowest birth rate in recorded history. Same government, same money, opposite result. So the question isn't, does money make people have babies? It's why does it work in one town and fail in an entire nation? That's what we're breaking down. Here's what this actually costs you, even if you don't live in Japan. Japan's population is shrinking by roughly 800,000 people a year. That's a city the size of San Francisco disappearing every 12 months. Fewer workers means fewer people paying into pensions, which means the pension you're counting on, if you're the one still working, gets stretched thinner every year. Fewer babies today means fewer taxpayers in 2050. Fewer taxpayers means either higher taxes on you or fewer services for you. There is no third option. And Japan isn't some outlier. South Korea's fertility rate is lower. Italy's is falling. Even the US is below replacement level. Japan is just 20 years further down a road a lot of countries are already on. So when Japan throws billions of dollars at this problem and still loses, that's not a foreign curiosity. That's a preview. Japan has run this experiment longer than anyone. Tokyo started paying families to have kids back in the 1990s. 3 decades of data, hundreds of local governments running their own versions, some succeeding wildly, most failing quietly. That's a big enough sample size to actually learn something. Not just about Japan, but about whether cash incentives change human behavior at all. Nagi, a small town on the edge of nowhere in western Japan. Population barely 6,000. In the 2000s, Nagi was dying. Young people left for the cities. Births kept falling. So the town did something blunt. Cash for kids. Roughly 100,000 yen for the first child. More for each additional one, plus free or subsidized childcare, subsidized medical costs, and subsidized housing for young families. By 2019, Nagi's fertility rate hit 2.95. The national average that year was around 1.36. Here's the takeaway. Nagi didn't just hand out money. It removed the surrounding cost of living around raising a kid, childcare, healthcare, housing, at the same time. The cash was the headline. The infrastructure was the engine. Write that down because it's the difference between every success story and every failure story in this video. Now take Tokyo. Tokyo has thrown similar incentives at families. Child allowances, subsidies, cash bonuses. Tokyo's fertility rate is under 1.0, the lowest of any region in the country. Why does the exact same tool, cash, fail here? Cost of living. In Tokyo, average apartment rent alone can eat a huge chunk of a young couple's income before childcare even enters the picture. A few $100s a month in incentives doesn't move the needle when your rent is measured in thousands. There's also the job factor. Tokyo careers are demanding, hours are long, and taking time off to raise a child is still, culturally and practically, penalized, especially for women. Takeaway: cash incentives only work when they're large relative to the actual cost of living. In a small town, a modest subsidy is meaningful. In a megacity, it's a rounding error. This is the same reason a $250 stimulus check changes behavior in a small town and does almost nothing in Manhattan. Japan's national government has spent enormous sums trying to reverse this. Child allowance programs have been expanded multiple times. In recent years, Japan pledged one of its largest ever budgets specifically aimed at child-rearing support, often described as roughly 3.5 trillion yen a year in expanded measures. And the birth rate still hit a record low. Here's the uncomfortable truth economists keep circling back to. Money helps at the margin, but it doesn't fix the two things actually driving the decline: The cost of raising a kid in a dense, expensive economy, and a work culture that makes parenting and full-time careers hard to combine. You can subsidize a symptom, you can't subsidize a structural mismatch. Takeaway. When a policy works in a controlled, small environment but fails at scale, that's usually a sign the underlying cost problem is bigger than the size of the subsidy. This isn't just a Japan story. It's a pattern you can use to evaluate any incentive, government, workplace, or personal. Ask one question. Is the incentive large relative to the actual cost it's supposed to offset? A company offering you a $500 signing bonus for a job with a brutal commute and no flexibility is doing the Tokyo version. A symptom fix on a structural problem. A city offering first-time homebuyers a modest grant in a market where homes cost 10 times income is doing the same thing. It looks generous. It doesn't move outcomes. But a smaller targeted benefit, free daycare, subsidized transit, reduced local rent, that's the Nagi version. Small in dollar terms, large relative to the actual cost it removes. Takeaway. Before you judge whether an incentive is generous, measure it against the real cost of the problem it's solving. That's the only number that matters. Japan is 20 to 30 years ahead of most developed economies on this curve. Its labor shortages, its aging population, its shrinking tax base, these are previews, not anomalies. Countries can copy Japan's cash incentives. Almost none are copying the structural fixes, cheaper housing near jobs, cheaper childcare, and workplace cultures that don't punish parents. That's the real lesson. The successful town proved the model works. The failing capital proved money alone can't force it. So back to where we started. One town hands out cash and triples the national birth rate. The whole country hands out even more money and hits a record low. Same tool, opposite outcome. Because the tool was never the point. The cost it was offsetting was. Here's your one action. Next time you see a government, a company, or even your own budget offer an incentive, don't ask how big it sounds. Ask how big it is next to the actual problem. If this kind of breakdown, the real economics behind the headlines, and is useful to you, subscribe. This channel exists to find the pattern behind the number every single time.